Wisconsin-Eye's coverage of Campaign 2014 is being brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice supporting Wisconsin hospitals in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 campaigns continues. We're interviewing Julian Bradley of La Crosse. He's a Republican candidate for Secretary of State. Julian, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye. I think you've been...
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
First of all, I ask candidates to talk about themselves. I'm intrigued by your website, in which case you said you've been going on a Shattering Stereotypes speaking tour.
Yes.
So let's start with that.
Sure. Well, I started the tour in 2013. In January of 2013, we kind of had the idea come about, and I hit the road pretty hard in April and May, and actually throughout ended up being the rest of 2013. The Shattering Stereotypes tour is talking about the stereotypes that are associated specifically in this case with the Republican Party and how they're out of touch with minorities, poor people, etc. And I come from a background, I come from a single parent household. We were on government assistance when I was a child, and obviously I am a minority, so I shatter all of those stereotypes just as myself. And as it turns out, I didn't always identify with the Republican Party. When I was a child, my mom was a staunch Democrat.
Is she still?
Well, she's deceased now, but she was up until the end, still a Democrat. And it was a conversation we had in 2002 regarding the issue of life. I made a snarky comment back to her. She was pro-choice, and I'm pro-life, and I made a comment back to her, and she said, "You sound like a Republican." And so, well, that's kind of mean. Why would you say that? And she said, "Well, you do." And it was kind of at that moment, it stuck in my head. I didn't realize that life was a partisan issue. So I decided to do some research. I headed down to the library, the public library in La Crosse, and kind of pulled the platforms of both parties, took some notes, made a list, and I found that I was just overwhelmingly conservative. It was 2002.
On the issues of life, pro-life?
Right. And the basic,
what else resonated?
Platform, it was giving you the opportunity yourself. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we've all heard that, but I think the Republican Party embodies that. We believe strongly in giving you the chance to succeed or fail on your own, and I like that. That appeals to me, and I think that appeals to most people. I'd like to have a chance. I don't want anything just given to me. Just give me the opportunity to prove myself. And that really resonated with me, and I like the fiscal conservative side of the house as well. Always keeping your financial house in order. Those things really just captured me. And again, it was 2002, so it was a gubernatorial election year. Scott McCallum had an office open in La Crosse, so I headed downtown, and I walked in, and a gentleman greeted me, and he said, "How can I help you?" I said, "Well, I think I'm one of you guys, but I don't know." and we sat down, we had a conversation, and I joined the party on the spot in 2002, and I've risen through the ranks since. I was elected vice chairman of the La Crosse County Party in 2011. I became chairman in 2012, re-elected in 2013, and then I became vice chairman of the 3rd Congressional District in 2013 as well. So my rise through the grassroots is a lot of what I talked about during the Shattering Stereotypes tour as well.
Did you go to some parts of rural Wisconsin? If so, have you ever not nicely been received on the tour?
On the tour, it's been fantastic, and on the campaign, it's been fantastic. I think people are just excited that somebody that looks like me is willing to step up and actually talk about some of these issues and talk about my journey. It was awkward for me because it wasn't really something I like to talk about until I realized nobody else was. Somebody needs to stand up and somebody needs to get this message out. I was tired of hearing my conservative friends labeled as things that I just know that they're not. And so I decided to stand up and do something about it.
Let's talk about your political development. You ran for the Assembly in 2010.
Yes.
You still hold a number of positions within the GOP party.
I do.
And now you're running for Secretary of State, which you and I agree either has 4 or 5 employees.
Correct.
Why did you choose that office? It's a statewide, it's a constitutional office, but why?
Sure.
Why that
well,
one?
during the tour, it kind of came up. It was during the speaking tour that it came up. People would ask me, "Julian, when are you going to run for office again?" And my answer to running for office has always been the same. As soon as I find a place where I can make the most positive impact. And when you take a look at the Secretary of State's office, that's a place that desperately needs some positive change. This is an office that's been stripped of employees and duties ever since my Democratic opponent was first elected. and that's a situation that's got to change. I believe that I bring the knowledge. I've been with a Fortune 150 company for nearly 10 years, so I know, and I'm a manager. I have several employees that report directly to me in a department, so I have that experience. I know what it's going to take to revamp things, to reform things. One of the most disheartening things about my campaign so far has been when I tell people I'm running for Secretary of State, and they say, "We elect that?" or "Who's there?" When you've been an incumbent for 36 years, people should know who you are. And so I want to bring not just some activity to the office, but some transparency. I want people to know we have a Secretary of State for the state of Wisconsin, and he's earning the value. He's got some value to the office, and he's earning that paycheck.
But over the last 20 years, as you say, the duties of that office have been systematically reduced. I think there's only like 1 or 2 functions left, one of which is the publishing of acts that are passed by the Senate and the Assembly, signed by the governor. Well, how do you use a office, even though it's a constitutional office, to raise its profile? And your website says a vigorous voice.
Well, actually the publishing of the acts was removed as well.
Well, that's true. Thank you for the correction.
So the Secretary of State still sits on the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, and then there's other various smaller duties, but it is a constitutional office, and by having a constitutional officer for the state of Wisconsin, you have an unofficial ambassador for the state. Many of the ideas and the things that I'd like to do with the office are going to take an act of the legislature, but to be an unofficial ambassador just takes an act of the voters, which means electing me as Secretary of State. From there, you can start just by raising the profile. The first thing I'd like to do is reach out to our county clerks and reestablish a relationship with all of the clerks, because I think the GAB is a great place of opportunity that should be moved under an elected official. You know, most states in the nation still have their elections division run through the Secretary of State. We do not. So I think that's a great opportunity. But, you know, I'm talking about day one as opposed to, you know, down the line, because it's going to take time. I think
you'd like that responsibility back?
I would.
Of overseeing campaign finance reports?
I would like the entire GAB moved to under the Secretary of State.
The entire GAB, both the ethics and the campaign finance?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that would be, I think what we're looking for right now is true accountability. And when you have an elected official over a board of that nature, you have that accountability. You finally have somebody that the voters, that the people can say, hey, you know, what are you doing with your department? And I think that would bring, by having a Secretary of State that's elected over that board, that would bring a lot of, it would shed a lot of light on a lot of the things that are happening.
Is the GAB broken, Julian?
I think the GAB is certainly encountering a lot of problems right now, and some oversight is going to occur. We've heard from various legislators that there's going to be auditing and they're going to be investigating the GAB, and that's one of the reforms that I'd like to bring to pass. It's going to be difficult to immediately get that to happen. Again, it comes to, in business, we call it proof of concept. You know, we've had a Secretary of State that's been dormant other than every 4 years for a long time. So I need to prove myself, and I think by getting elected, that's the first step in proving.
You would bring the GAB under a partisan officer yourself as a member of the GOP party. So,
well, as Secretary of State, you know, I don't think I'll be Secretary of State forever.
You'd be elected as a Republican, excuse me.
Yes.
And right now the argument is, well, GAB is now 7 former judges, all of whom have stood for election.
Correct.
So you think to bring more accountability, it should come under the
Secretary of State's office, yes.
Okay. Well, any other changes you'd be pushing for, sir?
And the day one changes go back to being an unofficial ambassador for the state of Wisconsin. Somebody that can reach out, somebody that can be kind of a connector between, you know, new businesses, because businesses were something that was previously under the Secretary of State. It's something that has been and is involved with many of the other secretaries of state throughout the nation. So I'd like to see some of those duties restored as well.
The discussion that you and I are aware of in the Capitol has been, let's get rid of 2 constitutional officers, State Treasurer and Secretary of State. Your response, sir?
I'm running for Secretary of State. I don't have a vote on that unless it goes to referendum. If that's the way that the legislature and the people decide, then you know that's what's decided. You take a look at the office and you see the duties that remain, and I'm not surprised. You know, I'm honestly not surprised. But here are the facts. We are going to have a Secretary of State for the next 4 years. So I've got a 4-year plan.
Okay.
I have something I'd like to do for the next 4 years, and if the office is gone after that, then that's the way the people decided.
At the end of 4 years then, if it were up to you, or you'd be working for bringing the GAB back under the auspices of the Secretary of State.
Right.
And what else? In 4 years out, what's your vision?
Well, that's a big one.
I can see that.
That's a very big one. That's a 4-year plan right there.
Right.
So that's where it starts, because it's going to take quite a bit of time to convince the people in the legislature that we can be responsible for that after having no duties for so long. Again, like I said, it's proof of concept. We've got to prove that the office can bring that value. So that's kind of the uphill battle that we'll face. And from there, I've got other things I'd like to plan to do, like I said, that are outside of meeting the legislature. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you were endorsed by the GOP state convention.
Yep, I won the endorsement vote with 66% of the vote in a 3-way race.
But you do have a primary.
Yes.
So do you want to highlight any differences between you and your primary challenger or opponent?
Well, I think we've done so today in our interview. My opponent hasn't really laid out a plan. Sometimes he's for eliminating the office, sometimes he's against it. I've got a very specific plan that hasn't changed since day one.
How do you run for Secretary of State when you say the reaction of many people is, we still have one, and we elect it?
Sure. Well, that's an uphill battle. It certainly is an uphill battle, but we've brought a lot of positive attention to the race. We have more than one candidate that had even expressed interest in running, which I think is a great start. And just by getting out there and campaigning, I've logged nearly 27,000 miles since January, which is really unheard of in a down-ticket race that most people kind of forget about. And that's the kind of work ethic I'm going to bring to the office. We're going to get out there and we're going to make sure people know that we have this constitutional office, and we're going to bring value back to that office.
I think Val Phillips of Milwaukee was the first African American to hold that job.
Yes.
He'd be the first GOP Republican.
Yes.
Does history play a role in your argument to be elected to win the primary and then the general?
My goal is on merit. I want people to say, you know what, there's Julian Bradley. He's got some great ideas. He's proven himself. He's got a proven track record. Let's give him a shot. Let's try to reform this office.
Oh, sir, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Julian Bradley is a Republican from La Crosse. He's running for the Secretary of State. The primary is August 12th. Mr. Bradley, thanks for coming to Wisconsin.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.